Well, I'm ready, so let's just start lah. Okay. I'm trying out OBS. I don't know if it's gonna work or not. I don't even know how to put the chat over there. Let me test here. Hello. I don't even know how to put the chat over there. Yeah, I think come on. Things will come out. Anyway, okay. So where were we? We were reading. We are reading The Painted Man by Peter V. Bragg. It's a good book, a good series. We did manage to finish chapter 2. So let's get on with it. No, can't see. So where we left off last, Arlen Bales had a predicament. His mom was stuck outside after sunset, and he rushed out to save her. Which she managed to do, but she was wounded horribly, poisoned. His dad didn't do anything, was too scared. Don't think I can use this phone as a camera. Okay. Gonna try change camera. I will try a different one. Let's configure this. Zoom. That should do. Okay. It's too big. Wait. Yeah. That should do it. Okay. So let's just start. Let's just continue. A strange sense of longing pulled at Arlen as he watched Tibbetts Brook recede into distance from the back of the cart. For the first time, it was going to be more than a day's journey from home. He was going to see another town. A week ago, an adventure like that was his greatest dream. But now, all he dreamed was that things would go back to the way they were. Back when the farm was safe. Back when his mother was well. Back when he didn't know his father was a coward. Colin had promised to send one of the boys up to the farm to let Norrin know they would likely be gone a week or more, and to help tend the animals and check the wards while they were away. The neighbours would throw in, but Norrin's loss was too raw for her to face the nights alone. The herb gatherer had also given them a crude map, carefully rolled and slipped into a protective hide tube. Paper was a rarity in the brook, and not given away lightly. Arlen was fascinated by the map and studied it for hours, even though he couldn't read the few words labeling the places. Neither Arlen nor his father had letters. The map marked the way to sunny pasture and what lay along the road, but the distances were vague. There were farms marked along the way where they could beg succor, but there was no way to tell how far apart they were. His mother slept fitfully, sodden with sweat. Sometimes she spoke or cried out, but her words made little sense. Arlen dabbed her with a wet cloth and made her drink the sharp tea as the herb gatherer had instructed him, but it seemed to do little good. Late in the afternoon, they approached the house of Hal Tanner, a farmer who lived on the outskirts of the brook. Hal's farm was only a couple of hours past the cluster by the woods, but by the time Arlen and his father had gone underway, it was mid-afternoon. Arlen remembered seeing Hal and his 3 daughters at the summer solstice festival each year, though they had been absent since the Corlings had taken Hal's wife 2 summers past. Hal had become a recluse, and his daughters with him. Even the tragedy in the cluster had not brought them out. 3/4 of the Tanner's fields were blackened and scorched. Only those closest to the house were warded and sown. A gaunt milking cow chewed cud in a muddy yard, and ribs showed clearly on the goat tied up by the chicken coop. The Tanner's home was a single story of piled stones held together with packed mud and clay. The larger stones were painted with faded wards. Arlen thought them clumsy, but they had lasted thus far, it seemed. The roof was uneven, with short, squat ward posts poking up through the rotting thatch. One side of the house connected to the small barn, its windows boarded and its door half off the hinges. Across the yard was the big barn, looking even worse. The walls might hold, but it looked ready to collapse on its own. "I've never seen Hal's place before," Jeb said. "Me neither," Arlen lied. Few people apart from the messengers had reason to head up the roads, past the cluster by the woods, and those who lived up that way were sources of great speculation in town square. Arlen had sneaked off to see Crazy Man Tanner's farm more than once. It was the farthest he had ever been from home. Getting back before dusk had meant hours of running as fast as he could. One time, a few months before, he almost didn't make it. He had been trying to catch a glimpse of Hal's eldest daughter, Elaine. The other boys said she had the biggest bubbies in the brook, and he wanted to see for himself. He waited one day and saw her come running out of the house crying. She was beautiful in her sadness, and Arlen had wanted to go comfort her, even though she was 8 summers older than him. He hadn't been so bold, but he'd watched her longer than was wise, and almost paid a heavy price for it when the sun began to set. A mangy dog began barking as they approached the farm, and a young girl came out onto the porch, watching them with sad eyes. "We might have to sucker here," Jeb said. "It's still hours till dark," Arlen said, shaking his head. "If you don't catch Reagan by then, the map says there's another farm up by where the road forks to the Fristies." Jeb peered over Arlen's shoulder at the maps. "That's a long way," he said. "Ma'am can't wait," Arlen said. "We won't make it all the way today, but every hour is an hour closer to her cure. Jeb looked back at Sylvie, bathed in sweat, then up at the sun, and nodded. They waved at the girl on the porch, but did not stop. They covered a great distance in the next few hours, but found no sign of the messenger or another farm. Jeb looked up at the orange sky. "It will be full dark in less than 2 hours," he said. "We have to turn back. If we hurry, we can make it back to Hal's in time. The farm could be right around that bend," Arlen argued. "We'll find it. We don't know that," Jeb said, spitting over the side of the cart. "The map ain't clear. We turn back while we still can, and no arguing." Arlen's eyes widened in disbelief. "We'll lose half a day that way, not to mention the night. Man might die in that time," he cried. Jeb looked back at his wife, sweating in her bundled blankets, breathing in short fits. Sadly, he looked around at the lengthening shadows and suppressed a shiver. "If we are caught out after dark," he replied quietly, "we'll all die." Arlen was shaking his head before his father finished, refusing to accept it. He floundered. "We could draw wards in the soil," he said at last, "all around the cart, and if a breeze comes along and mars them," his father asked, "what then?" The farm could be just over the next hill," Arlen insisted. "Or it could be 20 more miles down the road," his father shot back. "Or burned down a year ago. Who knows what happened since that map was drawn?" "Are you saying Ma'am ain't worth the risk?" Arlen accused. "Are you saying Ma'am ain't worth the risk?" Arlen accused. "Don't you tell me what she's worth," his father screamed, nearly bowling the boy over. "I've loved her all my life. I know better than you. But I'm not going to risk all 3 of us. She can last a night. She has to." With that, he pulled hard on the reins, stopping the cart and turning it around. He cracked the leather hard into Mrs. flanks and sent her leaping back down the road. The animal, frightened by the coming dark, responded with a frantic pace. Arlen turned back towards Sylvie, swallowing bitter anger. He watched his mother bounce around as the wheels ran over stones and dips, not reacting at all to the bumpy ride. Whatever his father thought, Arlen knew her chances had just been cut in half. The sun was nearly set when they reached the lonely farmhouse. Jeb and Missy seemed to share panic terror, and they screamed their haste as one. Arlen had leapt onto the back of the cart to try and keep his mother from being thrown about by the wildly jolting ride. He held her tight, taking many of the bruises and bashes for her. But not all. He could feel Colin's careful stitches giving, the wounds oozing open again. If the demon fever didn't claim her, there was a good chance the ride would. Jeb ran the cart right up to the porch, shouting, "Hal, we seek succor!" The door opened almost immediately, even before they could get out of the cart. A man in worn overalls came out, a long pitchfork in hand. Hal was thin and tough, like dried meat. He was followed by Elaine, the sturdy young woman holding a stout metal-headed shovel. The last time Arlen saw her, she had been crying and terrified, but there was no terror in her eyes now. She ignored the crawling shadows as she approached the cart. Hal nodded as Jep lifted Sylvie out of the cart. "Get her inside," he ordered, and Jep hurried to comply, letting a deep breath out as he crossed the wards. "Open the big barn door," he told Elaine. "That cart won't fit in the little one." Elaine gathered her skirts and ran. He turned to Arlen. "Drive the cart to the barn, boy, quick!" Arlen did as he was told. "No time to unhitch her," the farmer said. "She'll have to do." It was the second night in a row. Arlen wondered if Missy would ever get unhitched. Hal and Elaine quickly shut the barn door. Hal and Elaine quickly shut the barn door and checked the wards. "What are you waiting for?" the man roared at Arlen. "Run for the house! They'll be here in a moment." He had barely spoken the words when the demons began to rise. He and Arlen sprinted for the house as spindly clawed arms and horned heads seemed to grow right out of the ground. They dodged left and right around the rising death, adrenaline and fear giving them agility and speed. The first coilings to solidify, a group of lithesome flame demons gave chase, gaining on them. As Arlen and Elaine ran on, Hal turned and hurled his pitchfork into their midst. The weapon stuck the lead demon full in the chest, knocking it into his fellows. But even the skin of a tiny flame demon was too knobbed and tough for a pitchfork to pierce. The creature picked up the tool in its claws and spat a cut of flame upon it, setting the wooden half alight, then tossed to the side. But though the coiling hadn't been heard, the throw delayed them. The demons rushed forward, but as Hal leapt onto the porch, they came to an abrupt halt, slamming into a line of wards that stopped them as surely as if they had run into a brick wall. As the magic flared brightly and hurled them back into the yard, Hal rushed into the house. He slammed and bolted the door, throwing his back against the portal. "Greater be praised," he said weakly, panting and pale. The air inside Hal's farmhouse was thick and hot, stinking of must and waste. The buggy reeds on the floor absorbed some of the water that made it past the touch, but they were far from fresh. 2 dogs and several cats shared the homes, forcing everyone to step carefully. A stone pot hung in the fireplace, adding to the mix the sour scent of a stew perpetually cooking. Added to it as it diminished. A patchwork curtain in one corner gave a touch of privacy for the chamber pot. Arlen did his best to redo Sylvie's bandages, and then Elaine and her sister Benny put her in their room, while Hal's youngest, Rena, set another two cracked wooden bowls at the table for Arlen and his father. There were only 3 rooms, one shared by the girls, another for Hal, and the common room where they cooked and ate and worked. A ragged curtain divided the room, partitioning off the area for cooking and eating. A warded door in the common room led to the small barn. "Rena, take Arlen and check the wards while the men talk and Benny and I get supper ready," Elaine said. Rena nodded, taking Arlen's hand and pulling him along. She was almost 10, close to Arlen's age of 11, and pretty beneath the smudges of dirt on her face. She wore a plain shift, worn and carefully mended, and her brown hair was tied back with a ragged strip of cloth, though many locks had freed themselves to fall about her round face. She wore a plain shift, worn and carefully mended, and her brown hair was tied back with a ragged strip of cloth, though many locks had freed themselves to fall about her round face. "This one's scuffed," the girl commented, pointing to a ward on one of the sills. "One of the cats must have stepped on it." Taking a stick of charcoal from the kit, she carefully traced the line where it had been broken. "That's no good," Arlen said. "The lines ain't smooth anymore. That weakens the ward. You should draw it over." "I'm not allowed to draw a fresh one," Rena whispered. "I'm supposed to tell Father or Elaine if there's one I can't fix." "I can do it," Arlen said, taking the stick. He carefully wiped clean the old ward and drew a new one, his arm moving with quick confidence. Stepping back as he finished, he looked around the window and then swiftly replaced several others as well. While he worked, Hal caught sight of them and started to rise nervously, but a motion and a few confident words from Jeb brought him back to his seat. Alan took a moment to admire his work. Even a rock demon won't get through that, he said proudly. He turned and found Rena staring at him. What? He asked. You're taller than I remember, the girl said, looking down and smiling shyly. Well, it's been a couple of years, Alan replied, not knowing what else to say. When they finished their sweep, Hal called his daughter over. He and Rena spoke softly to one another, and Alan caught her looking at him once or twice, but he couldn't hear what was said. Dinner was a tough stew of parsnip and corn with meat Alan couldn't identify, but it was filling enough. While they ate, they told their tale. Wish you'd have come to us first, Hal said when they finished. We've been to old May Freeman plenty times, closer than going all the way to town square to see Trig. If it took you 2 hours of cracking the whip to get back to us, you'd have reached McPatch's farm soon, he pressed on. Old May, she's only an hour or so past that. She never did cotton to living in town. You'd really whipped that mare, you might have made it out tonight. Alan slammed down on his spoon. All eyes at the table turned to him, but he didn't even notice. So focused was he on his father. Jeb could not weather that glare for long. He hung his head. There was no way to know, he said miserably. Elaine touched his shoulder. Don't blame yourself for being cautious, he said. She looked at Alan, reprimand in her eyes. You'll understand when you're older, she told him. Alan rose sharply and stomped away from the table. He went through the curtain and curled up by a window, watching the demons through a broken slat in the shutters. Again and again they tried and failed to pierce the walls, but Alan didn't feel protected by the magic. He felt imprisoned by it. Take Alan to the barn and play, Hal ordered his younger daughters after the rest had finished eating. Elaine will take the bowls. Let your eldest talk. Benny and Rena rose as one, bouncing out of the curtain. Alan was in no mood to play, but the girls didn't let him speak, yanking him to his feet and out the door into the barn. Benny lit a cracked lantern, casting the barn in a dull glow. Hal had 2 old cows, 4 goats, a pig with 8 sucklings, and 6 chickens. All were gaunt and bony, underfed. Even the pig's ribs showed. The stock seemed barely enough to feed Hal and the girls. The barn itself was no better. Half the shutters were broken, and the hay on the floor was rotten. The goats had eaten through the wall of their stall and were pulling the cow's hay. Mud, slop, and feces had churned into a single muck in the pig's stall. Rena dragged Alan to each stall in turn. Dad doesn't like us naming the animals, she confessed, so we do it in secret. This one's Hoofy. She pointed to a cow. Her milk tastes sour, but Dad says it's fine. Next to her is Grouchy. She kicks, but only if you milk too hard and not soon enough. The goats are... Alan doesn't care about the animals, Benny scolded her sister. She grabbed his arm and pulled him away. Benny was taller than her sister and older, but Alan thought Rena was prettier. They climbed into the hayloft, plopping down on the clean hay. Let's play sucker, Benny said. She pulled a tiny leather pouch from her pocket, rolling 4 wooden dice onto the floor of the loft. The dice were painted with symbols: flame, rock, water, wind, wood, and ward. There were many ways to play, but most rules agreed you needed to throw 3 wards before rolling 4 of any other kind. They played at dice for a while. Rena and Benny had their own rules, many of which Alan suspected were made up to let them win. 2 wards 3 times in a row counts as 3 wards, Benny announced. After throwing just that, we win. Alan disagreed, but he didn't see much point in arguing. Since we won, you have to do what we say, Benny declared. Do not, Alan said. Do too, Benny insisted. Again, Alan felt as if arguing would get him nowhere. What would I have to do? He asked suspiciously. Make him play kissy, Rena clapped. Benny swatted her sister on the head. I know, Dums. What's kissy? Alan asked, afraid he already knew the answer. Oh, you'll see, Benny said, and both girls laughed. It's a grown-up game. Dad plays it with Elaine sometimes. You practice being married. What? Like saying your promises? Alan asked, wary. No, Dums, like this, Benny said. She put her arms around Alan's shoulders and pressed her mouth to his. Arlen had never kissed a girl before. She opened her mouth to him, so he did the same. Their teeth clicked, and both of them recalled, "Ow!" Arlen said, "You do it too hard, Benny." Rena complained, "It's my turn." Indeed, Rena's kiss was much softer. Arlen found it rather pleasant, like being near the fire when it was cold. "There," Rena said, when their lips parted. "That's how you do it." "We have to share the bed tonight. We can practice later." "I'm sorry you have to give up your bed on account of my ma'am," Arlen said. "It's okay," Rena said. We used to have to share a bed every night until ma'am died, but now Elaine sleeps with Da." "Why?" Arlen asked. "We're not supposed to talk about it," Benny insisted. Benny hissed at Rena. Rena ignored her, but she kept her voice low. Elaine says that now that Mam's gone, Da told her it's her duty to keep him happy, the way a wife is supposed to." Oh, fuck. "Like cooking and sewing and stuff?" Arlen asked. "No, it's game, like kissy," Benny said. "But you need a boy to play it." She tugged on his overalls. "If you show us your thingy, we'll teach you." "I'm not showing you my thingy," Arlen said, backing away. "Why not?" Arlen asked. Benny showed Lustig Belgin, and now he wants to play all the time. "Da and Lustig's father said we are promised," Benny bragged. "So that makes it okay. Since you're going to be promised to Rena, you should show her yours." Rena bit her finger and looked away, but he watched Arlen out of the corner of her eye. "That's not true," Arlen said. "I'm not promised to anyone." "What do you think the elders are talking about inside, Dums?" Benny asked. "I'm not," Arlen said. "Go see," Benny challenged. Arlen looked at both girls, then climbed down the ladder, slipping into the house as quietly as he could. He could hear voices from behind the curtain and crept closer. "I wanted Lustig right away," Hal was saying, "but Fernan wants him making mash for another season. Without an extra back around the farm, it's hard keeping our bellies full, especially since them chickens quit laying and one of the milk cows soured. We'll take Rena on our way back from May," Jep said. "Gonna tell him you're promised?" Hal asked. Arlen's breath caught. "No reason not to," Jeff said. Hal grunted. "Reckon you should wait till tomorrow," he said. "While you're alone on the road, sometimes boys cause a scene when they're first told. It can hurt a girl's feelings." "You're probably right," Jeff said. Arlen wanted to scream. "No, I am," Hal said. "Trust a man with daughters. They'll get upset over any old thing. Ain't that right, Lainey?" There was a smack, and Elaine yelped. But still, Hal went on. "You can do them no hurt than a few hours of crying oneself." There was a long silence, and Arlen started to edge back towards the barn door. "I'm off to bed," Hal grunted. Arlen froze. "Seeing how Sylvie's in your bed tonight, Lainey," he went on, "you can sleep with me after you scrape the bowls and round up the girls." Arlen ducked behind a workbench and stayed there as Hal went to the privy to relieve himself, and then went into his room, closing the door. Arlen was about to creep back to the barn when Elaine spoke. "I want to go too," she blurted, just after the door closed. "What?" Jeff asked. Arlen could see their feet under the curtain from where he crouched. Elaine came around the table to sit next to his father. "Take me with you," Elaine repeated. "Please, Benny will be fine once Lucy comes. I need to get away." "Why?" Jeff asked. "Surely you have enough food for 3. "It's not that," Elaine said. "It doesn't matter why. I can tell Dal will be out in the fields when you come for Rena. I'll run down the road and meet you there. By the time Dal realizes where I've gone, there'll be a night between us. He'll never follow." "I wouldn't be too sure of that," Jeff said. Your farm is as far from here as there is," Elaine pleaded. Arlen saw her put her hand on Jeff's knee. "I can work," she promised. "I'll earn my keep." "I can't just steal you away from Hal," Jeff said. "I've no quarrel with him, and I'm not about to start one." Elaine spat. "The old wretch would have you think I'm sharing his bed because of Sylvie," she said quietly. "True is, he raises his hand to me if I don't join him every night after Rena and Benny are off to bed." Jeff was silent a long time. "I see," he said at last. He made a fist and started to rise. "Don't, please," Elaine said. "You don't know what he's like. He'll kill you." "I should just stand by?" Jeff asked. Alan didn't understand what the fuss was about. So what if Elaine slept in Hal's room? Alan saw Elaine move closer to his father. You need someone to take care of Sylvie, she whispered. And if she should pass? She leaned in further, and her hand went to Jeb's lap the way Benny had tried to do to Alan. I could be your wife. I would fill your farm with children, she promised. Jeb groaned. Alan felt nauseous and hot in the face. He gulped, tasting bile in his mouth. He wanted to scream their plan to Hal. The man had faced a calling for his daughter, something Jeb would never do. He imagined Hal would punch his father. The image was not displeasing. Jeb hesitated, then pushed Elaine away. No, we'll get Sylvie to the herb gatherer tomorrow, and she'll be fine. Then take me anyway, Elaine begged, falling to her knees. I'll think about it, his father replied. Just then, Benny and Rena burst in from the barn. Alan rose quickly, pretending he had just entered with them as Elaine hurriedly stood. He felt the moment to confront them slip past. After putting the girls to bed and producing a pair of grimy blankets for Alan and Jeb in the main room, Elaine drew a deep breath and went into her father's room. Not long after, Alan heard Hal grunting quietly and the occasional muffled yelp from Elaine. Pretending not to hear it, he glanced over at Jeb, seeing him biting his fist. Alan was up before the sun the next morning, while the rest of the house slept. Moments before sunrise, he opened the door, staring at the remaining callings impatiently as he hissed and clawed the air at him from the far side of the wards. As the last demon in the yard went misty, he left the house and went to the big barn, watching Missy and Hal's other horses. The mare was in a foul temper and nipped at him. Just one more day, Alan told her as he put her feet back on. Her father was still snoring as she went back into the house and knocked on the door frame of the room shared by Rena and Benny. Benny pulled the curtain aside, and immediately Alan noted the worried looks on the sister's face. She won't wake up, Rena, who was kneeling by Alan's mother, choked. I knew you wanted to leave as soon as the sun rose, but when I shook her, she gestured toward the bed, her eyes wet. She's so pale. Alan rushed to his mother's side, taking her hand. Her fingers were cold and clammy, but her forehead burned to the touch. Her breathing came in short gasps, and the rotting sting of demon sickness was thick about her. Her bandages were soaked with brownish yellow ooze. Da! Alan cried. A moment later, Jeff appeared with Elaine and Hal close by. We don't have any time to waste, Jeff said. Take one of my horses to go with yours. Switch them when they're tired. Push hard, and you should reach May by afternoon. We are in your debt, Jeb said, but Hal waved the thought away. Hurry now, he said. Elaine will pack you something to eat on the road. Rena caught Alan's arm as he turned to go. We promise now, she whispered. I'll wait on the porch every task till you're back. She kissed him on his cheek. Her lips were soft, and the feel of them lingered long after she pulled away. The cart bumped and jerked as they raced along the rough dirt road, pausing only once to rotate the horses. Alan looked at the food Elaine had packed as if it were poison. Jeb ate it hungrily. As Alan picked up the grainy bread and hard pungent cheese, he started to think that maybe it was all a misunderstanding. Maybe he hadn't overheard what he thought he had. Maybe Jeb hadn't hesitated in pushing Elaine away. It was a tempting illusion, but Jeb shattered it a moment later. What do you think of Hal's younger daughter? She asked. You spent some time with her. Alan felt as his father had just punched him in the stomach. Rena? Alan asked, playing innocent. She's okay, I guess. Why? I spoke to Hal, his father said. She's going to come live with us when we go back to the farm. Why? Alan asked. To look after your mom, help her on the farm, and other reasons. What other reasons? Alan pressed. Hal and I want to see if you two will get along, Jeb said. What if we don't? Alan asked. What if I don't want some girl following me around all day, asking me to play kissy with her? One day, Jeb said, you might not mind playing kissy so much, so let her come then, Alan said, shrugging his shoulders, and pretending not to know what his father was getting at. Why is Hal so eager to be rid of her? You've seen the state of their farm. They can barely feed themselves, Jeb said. Hal loves his daughter very much, and he wants the best for them. And what's best is marrying them while they're still young. so he can have sons to help him out and grandchildren before he dies. Elaine's already older than most girls who marry. Lucic Boggin is going to come out to help on a house farm starting in the fall. They're hoping he and Benny will get along. I suppose Lucic didn't have any choices either. Arlen grumbled. He's happy to go, and lucky at that, Arlen's father snapped, losing his patience. You're going to have to learn some hard lessons about life, Arlen. There are a lot more boys than girls in the brook, and we can't just fritter our lives away. Every year, we lose more to dotage and sickness and callings. If you don't keep children coming, Tibbetts Brook will fade away just like 100 other villages. We can't let that happen. Arlen, seeing his normally placid father seething, wisely said nothing. An hour later, Sylvie started screaming. They turned to find her trying to stand up right there in the cart, clutching her chest, her breath coming in loud, horrid gasps. Arlen leapt into the back of the cart, and she gripped him with surprising strong hands, coughing thick phlegm onto his shirt. Her bulging, bloodshot eyes stared wildly into his, but there was no recognition in them. Arlen screamed as she thrashed about, holding her as steadily as she could. Jeb stopped the cart, and together they forced her to lie back down. She thrashed about, screaming in hoarse gasps, and then, like Charlie, she gave a final rack and lay still. Jeb looked at his wife, and threw his head back and screamed. Arlen nearly bit through his lip trying to hold back his tears, but in the end he failed. They wept together over the woman. When the sobs eased, Arlen looked around, his eyes lifeless. He tried to focus, but the world seemed blurry, as if it wasn't real. What do we do now? He asked finally. We turn around, his father said, and the words cut Arlen like a knife. We take her home and burn her. We try to go on. There's still the farm and the animals to care for, and even with Rena and Noreen to help us, there's going to be some hard times ahead. Rena? Arlen asked incredulously. We're still taking her with us? Even now? Life goes on, Arlen, his father said. You're almost a man, and a man needs a wife. Did you arrange one for both of us? Arlen blurted. What? Jeff asked. I heard you and Elaine last night. Arlen screamed. You've got another wife already. What do you care about, ma'am? You already got someone else to take care of your thingy. At least until she gets killed too, because you're too scared to help her. Arlen's father hit him, a hard slap across the face that cracked the morning air. His anger faded instantly. He reached out to his son. Arlen, I'm sorry, he choked. But the boy pulled away and jumped off the cart. Arlen! Jack cried, but the boy ignored him, running as hard as he could for the woods off to the side of the road. End of chapter 2. Man, he ran off alone. What time is it? It's 1. Let's continue. Chapter 3. A Night Alone, 319 AR. What is AR? Arlen ran through the woods as fast as he could, making sharp sudden turns, picking his direction at random. He wanted to be sure his father couldn't track him, but as Jep's calls faded, he realized his father wasn't following at all. Why should he bother, he thought. He knows I have to come back before nightfall. Where else could I go? Anywhere, the answer came unbidden, but he knew in his heart that it was true. He couldn't go back to the farm and pretend everything was alright. He couldn't watch Elaine claim his mother's bed. Even pretty Rena, who kissed so softly, would only be a reminder of what he'd lost and why. But where could he go? His father was right. Where could he go? His father was right about one thing. He couldn't run forever. He would have to find succor before dark. Wait, let me see. How do you pronounce succor? Why is volume off?
Succour.
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 Succour. Okay. He couldn't run forever. He would have to find succor before dark, or the coming night would be his last. Going back to Tibbetts Brook was not an option. Whoever he sought succor from would drag him home by the ear the next day, and he'd be switched for the start with nothing to show. Sunny pastures, then. Unless Hogg was paying them to carry something, almost no one from Tibbetts Brook ever went there, unless they were messengers. Colin had said Regan was heading to Sunny Pastures before returning to the Free Cities. Alan liked Regan. The only elder he'd ever met who didn't talk down to him. The messenger and Kirin were a day and more ahead of him, and mounted. But if he hurried, perhaps he could catch them in time and back passage to the Free Cities. He still had Colin's map strung around his neck. It showed the road to Sunny Pastures and the farms along the way. Even deep in the woods, he was pretty sure which way was north. At midday, he found the road, or rather, the road found him, cutting straight across the woods ahead of him. He must have lost his sense of direction in the trees. He walked on for a few hours, but he saw no sign of a farm, or the old herb gatherer's home. Looking at the sun, his worry increased. If he was walking north, the sun should be off to his left, but it wasn't. It was right in front of him. He stopped and looked at the map, and his fears were confirmed. He wasn't on the road to Sunny Pastures. He was on the road to the Free Cities. Worse, after the road split off from the path to Sunny Pastures, it went right off the edge of the map. The idea of backtracking was daunting, especially with no way to know if he could make it to Succour in time. He took a step back the way he had come. No, he decided. Going back is Dar's way. Whatever happens, I'm going forward. Alan started walking again, leaving both Tibbetts Brook and Sunny Pasture behind. Each step was lighter and easier than the one before. He walked for hours more, eventually leaving the trees behind and entering grassland, wide lush fields untouched by plough or grazing. He crested a hilltop, breathing deeply of the fresh, untainted air. There was a large boulder jutting from the ground, and Alan scrambled on top of it, looking out at a wide world that had always been beyond his reach. There was no sign of habitation, no place to seek succor. He was afraid of the coming night, but it was a distant feeling, like knowing you would grow old and die one day. As the afternoon turned to evening, Alan began looking for places to make his stand. A copse of trees held promise. There was little grass beneath them, and he could draw wards in the soil. But Wood Demon might climb on one of the trees and drop onto his warding right from above. There was a small stony hillock free of grass, but when Alan stood on top of it, the wind was strong, and he feared it might mar the wards, rendering them useless. Finally, Alan came to a place where flame demons had set a recent blaze. New buds had yet to pierce the ash, and a scuff of his foot found hard soil beneath. He cleared the ash from a wide area and began his warding circle. He had little time, so he kept it small, not wanting his haste to make him careless. Using a sharp stick, Alan drew the sigils in the dirt, gently blowing away loose scrapings. He worked for over an hour, ward by ward, stepping back frequently to assure himself that they were aligned properly. His hands, as always, moved with confidence and alacrity. When he finished, Alan had a circle 6 feet in diameter. He checked the wards 3 times, finding no error. He put the stick in his pocket and sat at the circle's center, watching the shadows lengthen and the sun dip low, setting the sky awash with color. Perhaps he would die tonight, perhaps not, Alan told himself. It did not matter. But as the light waned, so too did his nerve. He felt his heart pounding, and every instinct told him to leap to his feet and run, but there was nowhere to run. He was miles away from the nearest place of succor. He shivered, though it was not cold. This was a bad idea, a tiny voice whispered in his mind. He snarled at it, but the brave front did little to loosen his knotting muscles as the last rays of sun winked out, and he was bathed in darkness. "Here they come," that frightened voice in his head warned, as the wisps of mist began to rise from the ground. The mist coalesced slowly, demon bodies gaining substance as they slipped from the ground. Alan rose with them, clenching his small fists. As always, the flame demons came first, scampering about in delight, trailing flickering fire as they went. They were followed by the wind demons, which immediately ran and spread their leathery wings, leaping into the air. Last came the rock demons, laboriously hauling the heavy frames from the core. And then the Corlings saw Alan and howled with delight, charging the helpless boy. A swooping wind demon struck first, raking his hooked wing claws to tear out Alan's throat. Alan screamed, but sparks flew as the talon struck his wards, deflecting the attack. Momentum carried the demon on, and his body slammed into the shield, only to be hurled back in shimmering bursts of energy. The creature howled as it struck the ground, but it pulled itself upright, twitching as energy danced across its scales. Next came the nimble flame demons, the largest no bigger than a dog. They skittered forward, shrieking, and began clawing at the shields. Alan flinched each time the wards flared, but the magic held. When they saw that Alan had woven an effective net, they spat fire at him. Alan was wise to the trick, of course. He had been warding since he was old enough to hold a stick of charcoal, and he knew the wards against fire spit. The flames were turned as effectively as the claws. He didn't even feel the heat. Callings gathered to the spectacle, and each flash of light, as the wards activated, showed Alan more and more of them, a fell horde eager to flay the flesh from his bones. More wind demons swooped in and were thrown back by the wards. The flame demons too began to hurl themselves at him in frustration. Accepting the stinging burn of the magic in hope of powering their way through. Again and again they were thrown back. Alan ceased to flinch. He began to scream curses at them, shoving his terror aside. His defiance only enraged the demons further. Unused to being taunted by the prey, they doubled their efforts to penetrate the wards as Alan shook his fists and made rude gestures he had seen the adults in Tibersbrook make to hug back sometimes. This was what he feared? This was what humanity lived in terror of? These pathetic, frustrated beasts? Ridiculous, he spat. And the saliva sizzled on the flame's demon scales, trembling its fury. There was a hush from the howling creatures then. In the flickering light of the flame demons, he saw the quarreling hosts part, clearing a path for a rock demon that stomped towards him, its footsteps like an earthquake. All his life, Alan had watched quarrelings from afar, from behind windows and doors. Before the terrifying events of the last few days, he had never been outside in the air with a fully formed demon and had certainly never stood his ground. He knew their size could vary, but he had never appreciated just how much. The rock demon was 15 feet tall. The rock demon was enormous. Alan craned his head upwards as the monster approached. Even at a distance, it was towering, hulking mass of sinew and sharp edges. Its thick black carapace was knobbed with bony protrusions, and its spiked tail slid back and forth, balancing its massive shoulders. It stood hunched on two clawed feet that dug great grooves in the ground with every thunderous steps. Its long gnarled arms ended in talons the size of butchering knives, and its drooling maw split wide to reveal row after row of blade-like teeth. A black tongue slipped out, tasting Arlen's fear. One of the flame demons failed to move from its path quickly enough, and the rock demon swiped at it in an offhand manner, its tail tearing great gashes as the blow launched the smaller coralling through the air. Terrified, Arlen took a step back and then another as the giant coralling approached. It was only at the last moment that he came to his senses and stopped before he retreated right out of the protective circle. Remembering the circle gave fleeting comfort, Arlen doubted his wards were strong enough for this test. He doubted any wards were. The demon regarded him for a long moment, savoring his terror. Rock demons seldom hurried, though when they chose to, they could move with astonishing speed. As the demon struck, Arlen's nerves broke. He screamed and fell to the ground, curling up in a tight ball, covering his head with his arms. The resulting explosion was deafening. Even through his covered eyes, Arlen saw the bright flash of magic as if night had become day. He heard the demon's shriek of frustration and peeked out as the coiling whirled, smashing its heavy horned tail against the wards. Again the magic flared, and again the creature was thwarted. Arlen forced himself to let go of the breath he had been holding. He watched as the demon struck his wards again and again, screaming in rage. A warm dampness clung to his thighs. Ashamed of his cowardice, Arlen came to his feet and met the demon's eyes. He screamed, a primal cry from deep within him that rejected everything the coralling was and everything it represented. He picked up a stone and threw at the demon. "Go back to the core where you belong," he cried. "Go back and die." The demon barely seemed to feel the stone bounce off his armor, and his rage multiplied as it tore at the wards. Unable to get through, Arlen called the demon every foul and pathetic thing in his somewhat limited vocabulary, clawing at the ground for anything he could throw. When he ran out of stones, he began jumping up and down, waving his arms, screaming his defiance. Then he slipped and stepped on a ward. Time seemed to freeze in a long, silent moment shared by Arlen and the giant demon. The enormity of what had just happened slowly dawning on them. When they moved as one, Arlen whipping out his etching stick and diving for the ward, even as the demon swiped a massive clawed hand at him. His mind racing, Arlen assessed the damage in an instant. A single line of the sigil was marred. Even as he repaired the ward with a slash of the tool, he knew he was too late. The claws had begun to cut into his flesh. But then, the magic took effect once more, and the demon was hurled back, screaming in agony. Arlen too screamed in pain, rolling over and pulling the claws from his back, hurling them away before he could realize what had happened. He saw it then, lying in a circle, twitching and smoking, the demon's arm. Arlen looked at the severed limb in shock, turning to see the demon roaring and thrashing about, savaging any demon foolish enough to come within its reach, savaging with one arm. He looked at the arm, its end neatly severed and cauterized, oozing a foul smoke. With more bravery than he felt, Arlen picked the massive thing up and tried to hurl it from the circle. But the wards made a two-way barrier. The stuff of corallings could no more pass out than in. The arm bounced off the wards and landed back at Arlen's feet. Then the pain set in. Arlen touched the wounds along his back, and his hands came away wet with blood. Sickened, his strength ebbing, he fell to his knees, weeping for the pain, weeping for fear of moving and scuffing another ward, and weeping, most of all, for his ma'am. He understood now the pain she had felt that night. Arlen spent the rest of the night cowering in fright. He could hear the demons circling, waiting, hoping for an arrow that would allow them access. Even if sleep had been possible, he would not have dared to attempt it, lest a shift in his slumber grant the corallings their wish. Dawn seemed to take years to come. Arlen looked up at the sky often that night, but each time he saw only the giant, crippled rock demon clutching its caked and Icarus' wound as it stalked the circle, hatred in his eyes. After an eternity, a hint of red tinged the horizon, followed by orange, yellow, and then glorious white. The other coiling slipped back down to the core before the yellow touched the sky, but the giant waited until the last, its rows of teeth bared as it hissed at him. But even the one-armed rock demon's hatred was no match for its fear of the sun. As the last shadow scurried away, its massive horn head sank beneath the ground. Arlen straightened and stepped out from the circle, wincing in pain. His back was on fire. The wounds had stopped bleeding in the night, but he felt them tear open once more as he stretched. The thought led his eyes back to the clawed forearm lying next to him. It was like a tree trunk, covered in hard, cold plates. Arlen picked the heavy thing up and held it before him. Got a trophy at least, he thought, making an effort to be brave, even though the sight of his blood on the black tail sent a shudder through him. Just then, a ray of light reached him, the sun finally more above the horizon and below. The demon's limb began to sizzle and smoke, popping like a wet log thrown onto fire. In a moment, it pushed into flame and Arlen dropped it in flight. He watched, fascinated, as it flared brighter and brighter. The sun's light bearing down upon it until there was naught left but a thin charred remnant. He stepped over and gingerly nudged it with his toe, collapsing it into dust. Arlen found a branch to use as a walking stick as he trudged on. He understood how lucky he was, and how stupid. Wards drawn in the soil were untrustworthy. Even Regan had said that. What would he have done if the wind had marked them as his father threatened? Crater, what if it had rained? How many nights could he survive? Arlen had no idea what lay over the next hill. No reason to think that there was anyone between here and the Free Cities, which by all accounts were weeks away. He felt tears welling in his eyes. Brutally, he wiped them off, growling in defiance. Giving in to fear was his father's solution to problems, and Arlen already knew it didn't work. I'm not afraid, he told himself. I'm not. Arlen pressed on, knowing the lie for what it was. Around midday, he came to a rocky stream. The water was cold and clear, and he bent to drink. The move sent lances of pain through his back. He had done nothing for the wounds. It wasn't as if he could stitch them close as Colin might. He thought of his mother, and how when he came home with cuts and scrapes, the first thing she did was wash them out. He stripped off his shirt, finding the back torn and soaked through with blood, now crusted and hard. He dunked the shirt and watched as the soil and blood washed downstream. He laid his clothes out on the clogs to dry and lowered himself into the cold water. The chill made him wince, but it soon numbed the pain in his back. He scrubbed as best as he could, gently washing out the stinging wounds until he could stand it no more. Shivering, he climbed from the stream and lay on the rocks by his clothes. He woke some time later with a start. Cursing, he saw the sun had moved far across the sky, and the day was nearly done. He could travel a little further, but he knew the risk would be a foolish one. Better to spend the extra time on his defenses. Not far from the stream was a wide area of moist soil, and the sod pulled free easily, clearing him a space. He tamped down the loose dirt, smoothed it, and set to warding. He drew a wider circle this time, and then, after checking it thrice, drew another concentric ring within the first for added safety. The moist earth would resist the wind, and the sky showed no threat of rain. Satisfied, Arlen dug a pit and gathered dry twigs, building a small fire. He sat in the center of the inner circle as the sun dipped, trying to ignore his hunger. He doused the fire as the red sky grew lavender, then purple, breathing deeply to steady his pounding heart. At last, the light vanished and the callings rose. Arlen held his breath, waiting. Finally, a flame demon caught his scent and raced at him with a shriek. In that moment, the terror of the previous night came rushing back to him, and Arlen felt his blood go cold. The callings were oblivious to his wards until they were upon them. With the first flare of magic, Arlen breathed his relief. The demons clawed at the barrier, but they could not pass. A wind demon, flying up high where the wards were weak, passed the first ring, but it smashed into the second as it swooped down at him, landing hard in the space between. Alan struggled to maintain his calm as it lurched to its feet. It was bipedal, with long, thin body and spindly limbs that ended in 6-inch hooked claws. The undersides of his arms and the outsides of his legs were webbed with a thin, leathery membrane, supported by flexible bones jutting from the creature's sides. Barely taller than an adult man, the demon's spread wings spanned twice its height, making it seem huge in the sky. A curving horn grew from his head, bent back and webbed like its limbs to form a ridge down its back. Its long snout held rows of inch-long teeth, yellow in the moonlight. The coiling moved clumsily on land, despite its graceful mastery of the air. Up close, the wind demons were not nearly as impressive as their cousins. Wood and rock demons had impenetrable armor and otherworldly strength to power their thick claws. Flame demons were faster than any man and spat fire that could set anything alight. Wind demons, Alan thought Regan could puncture one of those thin wings with a hard stab of his spear, crippling it. Night, he thought. I'm pretty sure I could do it myself. But he didn't have a spear, and impressive or not, the coiling could still kill him if his inner wards did not hold. He tensed as it drew close. It swiped the hooked talon at the end of his wing. It swiped the hooked talon at the end of his wing at him, and Alan winced. It swiped the hooked talon at the end of his wing at him, and Alan winced. But magic sparked along the ward net, and he was thwarted. After a few more futile strikes, the coiling attempted to get airborne again. It ran and spread its wings to catch the wind. But struck the outer wards before it could gain sufficient momentum. The magic threw it back into the field. The magic threw it back into the mud. Alan laughed in spite of himself as the coiling tried to pick itself up. Its huge wings dragged on the ground and threw it off balance. It had no hands to push up with, and its spindly arms bowed under its weight. It thrashed desperately for a moment before it was able to rise. Trapped, it tried again and again to take off, but the space between the circles was not great enough, and was foiled each time. The flame demons sensed their cousin's distress, and shrieked with glee, hopping around the circle to follow the creature and taunt its misfortune. Alan felt a swell of pride. He had made mistakes the night before, but he would not make them again. He began to hope that he might live to see the free cities after all. The flame demon soon tired of mocking the wind demon and moved off in search of easier prey, flushing small animals from hiding with gouts of fire. One small frightened hare leapt into Alan's outer ring. The demon in pursuit stopped by the wards. The wind demon snatched clumsily at it, but the hare dodged easily, running through the circle and out the far side, only to find Collins there as well. It turned and darted back in, again running too far. Alan wished there was a way he could communicate with the poor creature to let it know it was safe in the inner ring, but he could only watch as it darted in and out the wards. Then the unthinkable happened. The hare, scampering back into the circle, scratched out a ward. With a howl, flame demons poured through the gap after the animal. The lone wind demon escaped, leaping into the air and winging away. Alan cursed the hare, cursed all the more when it darted right for him. If it damaged the inner wards, they were both doomed. With a farm boy's quickness, Alan reached for the circle and snatched up the hare by its ears. It thrashed wildly, willing to tear itself apart to escape, but Alan had handled hares in his father's field often enough. He swung it with his arms, cradling it on his back, hindquarters up above his head. In a moment, the hare was staring up at him blankly, its struggle ceased. He was tempted to throw the creature to the demons. It would be safer than risking it getting free and scuffing another ward. And why not, he wondered. If I found it in the light, I'd eaten it myself. Still, he found he could not do it. The demons had taken too much from the world, from him. He swore then that he would give them nothing willingly, not now, not ever, not even this. As the night wore on, Arlen held the terrified creature firmly, cooing at it and stroking its soft fur. All around, the demons howled, but Arlen blocked them out, focusing on the animal. The meditation worked for a while until a roar brought him back. He looked up to find a massive one-armed rock demon towering over him, its drool sizzling as it struck the wards. The creature's wound had healed into a knobbly stump at the end of its elbow. Its rage seemed even greater than the night before. The calling hammered at the barrier, ignoring the stinging flare of the magic. With deafening blows, the rock demon struck again and again, attempting to power through and take its vengeance. Arlen clutched the hair tightly, his eyes wide as he watched. He knew that the wards would not weaken from repeated blows, but it did little to stop the fear that the demon was determined enough to manage it anyway. When the morning light banished the demons for another day, Arlen finally let go of the hair, and it bounded away immediately. His stomach growled as he watched it go, but after what they had shared, he could not bring himself to look at the creature as food. Rising, Arlen stumbled and almost fell as a wave of nausea took him. The cuts along his back were lances of fire. He reached back to touch the tender, swollen skin, and his hand came away wet with that stinking brown ooze that Colin had drained from Sylvie's wounds. The cuts burned, and he felt flushed. He bathed in the cold pool again, but chill water did little to ease his inner heat. Arlen knew that he was going to die. Old May Freeman, if she existed at all, was over 2 days away. If he truly had demon fever, though, it didn't matter. He would last 2 days. Still, Arlen could not bring himself to give in. He stumbled on down the road, following the wagon's ruts towards wherever they came from. If he was to die, that would be closer to the free cities than the prison behind. End of chapter 3. I think I'm gonna play a game. Yeah. So let's see. Okay. Okay. Gonna play board games for a while. Mm-mm. Why am I? I'm blue. Let's write some notes. We should four is fine. Why am I? I'm blue. Let's write some notes. Should four is fine. Why am I? I'm blue. Okay, I thought to go there. How many resources do I have? 4, 7. Okay. 7. Okay. So. Go west. Between or 8. And Clayton. And what color? Orange. No, this one. I think this one. Yeah, that's a good. How many shots do I have? 4, 7. Okay. 7. Okay. So. Oh, west. Between 4, 8. Tick in hand. Okay. See. Split Arena. Roll and bump. Okay. You move first. So this game is you wanna get as much cards as you can. So that's the suit. Yeah, so I can compete with that or so if you have 2 cards, you have bonus 3 according to this points. So you want to get as much cards as you can in the early rounds. You got good rolls. She got nothing. So lucky. I'm gonna lose this one. Wow. Got really good rolls. Only was one line.
Mm.
Bye.